we are expecting to see several videos this afternoon. We know we will see the dash cam video along with body cam video. There's also a Ring doorbell video that we're expecting to see, and a cell phone video from one of the passengers in the car, Patrick Lyoya's car. Now, we don't know exactly how much of that body cam video, what it will show, because police did tell us it fell off during a lengthy fight between Lyoya and the officer who pulled the trigger. But of course, we are standing by as we're waiting to see exactly what those videos show. And we'll send it back to you guys for now.
Save my energy till I don't do my work. Excuse me, pardon me. So everybody hold on, just very quickly, just a few administrative notes, okay? We're going to begin here in just a second. I'm the City Communications Director, David Green. Basically, what's about to happen is we're going to have 3 people speak to you this afternoon. We're going to have the City Manager, Mark Washington. We're going to have the Director of Public Oversight and Accountability, Brandon Davis, and then Chief Winstrom will give you the critical incident briefing where he will walk you through the video. This is being live streamed on YouTube. I know a number of you are taking this feed live. I want to reiterate that we will be showing the discharge of the weapon. The weapon fires twice, right? It fires one time, but we have 2 angles. So you will see it twice. Both instances, the chief will pause the video long enough for you to do whatever you need to do back in your control rooms and take away from the feed, okay? After he's done doing that portion, we will go to a Q&A. We're prepared to stay here as long as necessary, but I do want to reiterate a couple of things about that as well. The criminal investigation is being conducted by a third party. We may not have answers or insights into certain aspects of the investigation. We'll share with you the information we can, all right? So just please, I ask that you be patient. In other words, you can ask the same question as many times as you like. If it's one of those that is better answered by either the prosecutor's office, the Michigan State Police, or the medical examiner, that's where we're going to have to refer you, and that answer is not likely to change no matter how many times you ask it. I get you're doing your job. I just want to make sure that we're all clear and aware of what's happening, okay? Does anybody have any questions or needs from us? Because we've got about a few seconds before we're going to go. No? Okay. At this time, City Manager Mark Washington, sir, you're free to go ahead and begin.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here on this very sad day for our city, our state, and our country. Unfortunately, I'm here today because our city is now added to the list of cities across the country where another African-American man has died as a result of the use of lethal force with the interaction of law enforcement. I offer my sincere condolences to the family of Patrick Lyoya, who is grieving the death of a son, a father, and brother. And this is also a very difficult time for the members of our police department and the officers specifically as they process this very regrettable event in which a life has to be taken in enforcement of the law. When I saw the video, it was painful to watch, and I immediately asked, what caused this to happen, and what more could have been done to prevent this from occurring. I continue to ask those questions and will be looking for those answers as a result from the investigative process, as well as future improvements to policy and practice. As a nationally recognized expert on the use of force, we are fortunate to have Chief Winstrom, who is both a certified law enforcement officer as well as an attorney. And he is well positioned to help us find answers, identify accountability, and propose improvements. As city manager, the public has my commitment to get through this together. But there will be understandably expressions of shock, of anger, and of pain. We acknowledge that this is a necessary process, but the city has the courage to embrace the tough questions and answer those questions, and are committed to operating with full transparency and accountability to make sure that justice prevails. Again, I want to thank Police Chief Winstrom for his commitment to transparency and agreeing to release the video which you will see today, despite requests for waiting to do so. I also want to thank our community partners and advocates for providing the necessary support during this difficult time while still holding us accountable to make sure that its police department and its government not only does the right things in terms of process, but also does the right thing in terms of decisions. We are determined to get this right. Several years ago, reflecting our commitment to accountability, our city commission adopted a policy requiring a third-party investigation of all officer-involved shootings. And this is to be led by the Michigan State Police. The city immediately utilized that policy following the unfortunate incident on April the 4th. As of today, that investigation is still ongoing, and we have not heard the determination from the prosecutor, we have not heard the determination from the Michigan State Police or a determination from the prosecutor, but the chief will operate in full transparency to let the public know what he knows of what happened at that time. I urge the state police to prioritize and continue their investigation in an urgent manner. This family, the officer, and our community deserves answers. Our oversight office will continue to monitor and investigate the actions, and our city attorney has actively been involved. And at this time, I would like to present our Director of Oversight and Public Accountability, who monitors the actions of the police department, Mr. Brandon Davis.
Thank you, City Manager, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brandon Davis. I serve as the Director of Oversight and Public Accountability here in the City of Grand Rapids. This is an exceptionally tough time for our community. I want to start by sharing my sincerest thoughts and prayers with the family of Patrick Lyoya, with our community, and all those who have been impacted by this incident. The loss of life is always tragic, and given the history of our country, when a life, particularly the life of a Black man, is lost during an interaction with law enforcement, there's a great deal of emotion, frustration, and anger. As an oversight professional, it is important that I review, monitor, and audit all investigations impartially based on law and policy, and I will do that. However, that does not remove my humanity or empathy, and as such, I grieve with our community. Throughout this process, I have been extremely grateful for the collaboration and openness that the Chief and GRPD have shown to the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. In this instance, the Chief made sure to notify me of the events of April 4th and welcomed me to the scene in order to ensure that there was independent oversight monitoring the activity that was taking place. Additionally, the Chief ensured that OPA had access to the videos of this incident. It is without hesitation that I say, since his arrival, Chief Winstrom and GRPD have been more collaborative with the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability than any other time in OPA's history. With that being said, While monitoring this first phase of the investigation, I've noted items for us to consider to ensure that we do the best job possible of ensuring accountability and transparency as we move forward. After this investigation is concluded, we'll do a post-incident review of the city's actions and consider concerns like how much time it took to release the video of this incident, or questions like when should an officer's name be released in connection with an investigation. We have to ask how much time it took to render aid, or what policy changes, if any, can be implemented to help prevent this type of result. We also have to ask questions like when should officers use disengagement as a form of de-escalation. I'm committed to thoroughly reviewing these matters post-investigation and any other questions or concerns that might arise throughout the course of the investigation. However, right now, the most important thing for my office to do is to monitor this investigation to ensure that there is truth and accountability. There are several agencies that will be involved throughout the course of this investigation. I want to take a moment to help clarify the roles of different agencies throughout the process. The Michigan State Police are responsible for the criminal investigation in this case. Pursuant to city policy, whenever there is an officer involved shooting, we refer that investigation to the Michigan State Police. Once the Michigan State Police complete their investigation, they will forward that investigation, if they choose to the Kent County Prosecutor's Office for the review for criminal charges. It is the prosecutor's office that has the ability to make a decision regarding criminal charges. The city of Grand Rapids does not have any authority or discretion in that space. The MSP will also forward that investigation to the Grand Rapids Police Department for review by the Internal Affairs Division, and there will be an Internal Affairs investigation. That investigation will be monitored by the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. We will audit that investigation. We will seek transparency. We will seek truth. Justice requires that this matter be handled fairly and efficiently. The Lyoya family and all the parties involved deserve a fair and transparent investigation. As the director of OPA, I will do everything in my power to make sure that that happens. At this point, I'll turn it over to the chief.
This is a difficult day. My heart goes out to the family of Patrick Lyoya. I want to thank the city for the patience it's shown during this process, and I especially want to thank the Congolese community of West Michigan, who even in their grief and anger have shown me nothing but love and respect. I also want to thank the men and women of the Grand Rapids Police Department who continue to sacrifice and come to work each day during this, what is the most difficult times. I'm going to play the video, which is about 20 minutes. I will be pausing it twice before, in two different segments, before the fatal gunshot is fired. This critical incident community briefing will provide you with information about a recent officer-involved shooting that occurred on April 4th, 2022. This briefing has been prepared so that you may have a better understanding of the circumstances which led to the use of force. Grand Rapids Police Department does conduct very thorough investigations of use of force. Every officer-involved shooting is a traumatic event for all involved, and each officer-involved shooting is reviewed by the Michigan State Police to ensure compliance with the law. Even as the Grand Rapids Police Department and the Michigan State Police conduct their own investigations, the Kent County Prosecutor's Office conducts an independent review of the incident. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Both agencies are in the very early stages of the investigation. Our understanding of the incident may change as additional evidence is collected, analyzed, and reviewed. These investigations typically require multiple witness interviews, review of video footage, and analysis of significant amounts of forensic evidence. We do not draw conclusions about whether the officer involved acted consistent with the law, our policies, and our training until the facts are known and the entire investigation is complete. The initial videos you will see in this briefing were captured with a body-worn camera and in-car camera video of the Grand Rapids police officer. The other videos in this briefing were captured by a home surveillance system and a cell phone recording. The body-worn camera is placed near the center line of an officer's uniform shirt. It is important to note the camera lens is fixed and does not capture what is seen by the human eye. It is affixed to the uniform by a magnet system and can be knocked off, or buttons could potentially be manipulated during a physical encounter. Materials presented in these videos have been redacted to protect the privacy rights of the individuals. However, such redactions do not affect the depiction of events presented in these videos. There is graphic content, as I've said. On Monday, April 4th, 2022, at approximately 11 a.m., a Grand Rapids police officer observed a vehicle with an improper Michigan registration driving west on Griggs Street Southeast from Newark Avenue Southeast. The officer followed the vehicle and performed a traffic stop on Nelson Avenue Southeast, north of Griggs Street. The vehicle was driven by Patrick Lyoya, a 26-year-old male. The vehicle was also occupied by another individual who filmed a portion of the incident. This video is from the Grand Rapids police officer's in-car video recording. In-car video recording begins 90 seconds prior to activation. Audio recording begins at activation. Hey, stay in the car! Stay in the car! You'll see shortly, well, you won't see it, out of view shortly, the first responding officer for backup is going to arrive. And instruct the passenger of the vehicle to walk backwards. This is video from the Grand Rapids police officer's body-worn camera.
Hey, stay in the car! Stay in the car! Stay in the car! Get in the car! Dude, I'm stopping you. Do you have a license? Do you have a license? I'm stopping you. Do you have a license? Do you have a driver's license? Do you speak English?
Yes.
Can I see your license? The plate doesn't belong in this car. Do you have a license or no? Do you have a driver's license? Where is it at? Get it for me. The plate does not belong in this car. No. Stop. Put your hands here. Stop. 1915. Got one running. Wow. Stop. Stop! Stop resisting! Let go of the taser!
The officer's body-worn camera deactivated at this point. This video was captured from a neighborhood home surveillance system. That sound was a taser discharging. In about 10 seconds, the fatal shot will be captured on this video. This is the entire video obtained from a third-party cell phone recording.
Yeah. Now his age is good, but man, yo, what's up, man?
Stop. Stop resisting.
No, he good, not resisting nothing, bro. Okay, why you gotta do all that, bro? He good, man.
That was the sound of a taser discharging.
Let's call the taser. Let's call the taser.
No, he good, like you can talk to him, bro. Like he good, bro. Like, can you talk to him like good? Like, can you, yeah. Stop grabbing him like that. No, he good like for yo, you hit him too.
Let's call the taser.
No, he ain't grabbing no tail.
before we have the chief come to answer any questions that he may be able to do, again, this is very regrettable, very sad day in our community, and we have heard several expressions of a range of emotions, and we will get through this. It will be hurtful, but it will help us to get to the bottom of all the questions that were highlighted earlier. I want to thank our city commissioners also for their support. Several of them are here today. And the mayor is here with us. I also want to, again, express my condolences to the family. And I also acknowledge the voices we have been hearing calling for this, along with more answers to questions and accountability. And all of them have been peaceful. All the demonstrations and protests have been peaceful. I want to thank those community partners who have been helping to organize those protests in a peaceful manner. I see Commissioner Womack here today. Thank you for that, along with the community pastors and who have been helping the family, as well as their outside counsel, Attorney Crump, who spoke to our community and expressed the desires to get down to and get answers as well as justice, but do it in a way that is respectful of honors Patrick's life and as his family has wished. So at this time, I'm going to have the chief come and answer any questions about the actual incident.
Chief Winstrom, do you plan on naming the officer? Who was this officer that was involved?
So I've got, so the question is, am I planning on naming the officer? And usually over the past few days, that question has been framed, and if this was anybody but a police officer, you would have said the name. And I'm going to treat the officer like I would anybody else. We don't name suspects. If the officer is charged with a crime, we will name him at that time. But the short answer is no, I'm not going to be naming the officer.
How do you expect people to have trust in this process then if they don't know who this officer is?
Sure. And I'll tell you, so the process is this. We have an outside agency looking into this incident. It's the Michigan State Police. Generally speaking, when they complete their investigation is traditionally when videos like this would be released. We felt that on balance, it was more important to be transparent with the community, to provide what information the Grand Rapids Police Department has immediately before that process is finished. So that might be a better question for the Michigan State Police to say when their investigation will be complete, to provide the answers that I can't give.
Are the actions taken by this officer in accordance with Grand Rapids Police use of force policy?
That's a great question, and one that we will definitely come to an answer with. However, I'm not running the investigation. This is the video of the information that I have, but there is an entire investigation being conducted by the Michigan State Police, which I do not have access to by design for conflict of interest. I will not make a policy decision, nor will I come to a conclusion of criminal law at this time. As soon as that investigation is completed and handed over to my agency, we will come to those conclusions.
Where was the
Go ahead.
Why was the body cam deactivated?
Sure, that's a great question. The body-worn camera, as you can tell from the video, was deactivated. We actually own that body-worn camera because it was on a Grand Rapids Police Department officer, and that technology is such that it's a record, not only every time it turns on and off, but every time the button is tapped. So to turn a body-worn camera off once it's activated, the officer has to hold the button steady for 3 seconds. What we've seen in examining the information on that is that it was hit many times during that struggle. That was the first moment that it was held down for more than 3 seconds. That's what deactivated it.
Chief Winstrom, was there an effort to get anyone from the prosecutor's office here at the press conference? And if so, why not?
That's a great question, sir. So the question is the prosecutor's office here? How the process works is the Michigan State Police will conclude their investigation and either work with right now, they may be working with Chris Becker's office right now, or complete the investigation and hand it off to the prosecutor for review. And the reason that I'm not asking the prosecutor to come stand with me today or the Michigan State Police is for that division to prohibit the conflict of interest, to make sure that there really is that wall between us to protect the integrity of the investigation. So that's why they're not. So I haven't talked to Chris Becker about the details of this investigation.
Chief,
When he's made his decision.
Chief, when you have national law enforcement experience, you've been in law enforcement for a long time. typically when you have a suspect on their stomach trying to get them cuffed or whatever, walk us through what is an officer trying to do in that situation when a suspect is fighting back and you have that suspect on their stomach?
Typically, the answer is that you're trying to place them in custody. That's it. You're trying to secure that individual. The follow-up question I'm sure will be, was the use of force in policy, and I'm not going to comment on that, but the test is going to be whether in the view of a reasonable police officer, whether that deadly force was needed to prevent death or great bodily harm to that officer. That's the test which will be used for the policy.
Is an officer, follow up on that, is an officer being hit with a taser considered great bodily harm?
So that's a complicated question. It depends on where you go. But the short answer is it can be. So a taser is not per se a deadly weapon. The taser is what would be known as an intermediate weapon. Intermediate weapon would have the potential to cause death. It would have the potential to cause great bodily harm, but not necessarily. And that's depending on all the facts of the case.
Chief Westrom, can you talk about why that officer made the stop by himself and at what point he called for backup?
Well, I can answer the second part easier, and that is because if you listen closely to the body-worn camera transmission, when he calls that there's an individual running, that triggers the call for backup. The first part of your question was?
Why he made the stop by himself. Why
he make a stop? I don't know the answer to that question at this time.
You mentioned the body camera. You explained how it turns off technology-wise. Did your officer turn it off?
Did the officer turn it? So no, but from the context that I can tell, it appears that the body-worn camera is turned off because of the pressure from the other individual or some other object on his body. But that's again, that will come out once the investigation is complete.
Did they say that they didn't press it?
The officer say, okay, so I'm not going to get into the officer's statements at this time until the completion of the investigation. I'm sorry.
Chief, can you say how long your officer has been on your force?
I believe 7 years.
Did they
Just let him go.
I don't have the answer to that question.
And the stop was for mismatched plates as you all have described it. But do you know what suspicion prompted him to even run those plates?
That'll all come out with the investigation. So just to be clear again, the reason that we're having this today is this is transparency about the use of force incident. Want to be as transparent as possible. There's a lot of factors. There's what happened before, how the stop, how did why the foot pursuit. There's what happens after, when CPR was started. I've been asking about that. How long did the body stay on scene? So there's a range of questions. I don't have all those answers because this is not a Grand Rapids Police Department investigation. What I wanted to do today was provide to you the basic information that I have in the spirit of transparency on the use of force incident itself.
Did they?
Questions.
When an officer notices a mismatched license plate, for instance, is Grand Rapids policy that they call for backup or that they can do it either way?
Again, not necessarily. That would be a case-by-case basis as to whether or not, in the officer's judgment, it determined that this would be a situation where they needed backup or not. Mismatched plate is not a felony.
Do you know how recently that officer went through any de-escalation training or anything of that sort?
I don't have the exact dates. I have not reviewed his training record, no. Yes?
Chief, in the home surveillance video, it looks like it's kind of redacted or blocked out at the bottom.
That's right.
Was that something the police department did?
So we did that to provide the homeowner a little bit more privacy.
Without the redaction, does it show the shooting?
No, it does not. Actually, the shooting can be viewed in that scene. We don't blur any portion of the shooting. It's just because of the distance that it's not suitable for close examination, but the entire video is there.
Chief, two questions. As I watch this, we're from Detroit. Can you describe how this is or is not similar to perhaps a high-speed chase where the guy runs off, but it was only an improper plate? Could that officer have decided to let him go? There was another passenger in the car and de-escalated at that moment and not continue to escalate it, to continue to pursue him. When the taser failed, let him go at that point so that it didn't reach that end point that we all now see and have regret. Is that a possibility?
So your comparison, it's close, but and I'll tell you the differences. So when an officer's in a traffic pursuit, essentially you're chasing a 2,000-pound projectile, which is inherently dangerous, which is why traffic pursuit policies exist in most agencies across the country, including ours, which restrict pursuits for things like forcible felonies, things like that. When it gets to foot pursuit policies, most law enforcement looks at that from a training standard. So it's not, you can't contemplate every scenario in a foot pursuit to put it into a well-crafted policy. So foot pursuits, things like that, when to de-escalate, that's something that we train heavily on.
But that's that officer's discretion at that point. In other words,
Consistency with the officer's training.
and
Right.
could he have stopped, is my question.
That's a policy conclusion. I'm not going to come to a conclusion until I know all the facts of the case. I appreciate the question, though.
One more question. At the beginning of this, the city manager called this a sad day for the city, for the state, for the country, called it shocking. This is going to be a shock, anger, and pain. Is this Michigan's version of George Floyd, sir?
Again, so you're asking me to draw a conclusion on this, on the incident. That would be a legal conclusion that I'm not prepared to draw today.
You as chief, how do you view it?
Thank you. I view it as a tragedy.
What was your initial reaction?
Well, my initial reaction, I had been on scene. I had seen the videos that we had possession of, which was the in-car camera and the body-worn camera, and then I saw the video surveillance, and it was just a progression of sadness for me. So the loss of life in any circumstance is sad, and when I know that it's going to impact our city like this, it was more sadness. Me being so new here, it was sad.
Based on what you see in these videos, Chief Winstrom, do you anticipate this officer facing disciplinary action from the department?
That's a good question, and I am unable to draw a conclusion at the time because of this. That would potentially violate the officer's rights, and until I have the investigation, I can't make that determination.
Chief, can you talk about the officer in that kind of situation pulling his weapon in that way?
Can you ask that again, sir? I didn't hear
Can
you.
you talk about the officer pulling his weapon? Is there a reason why?
Well, right. So officers, I went through the use of force standard with you for deadly force, but again, we would expect an officer only to pull their weapon when they anticipate the need to legally use the weapon.
To clarify, was a weapon recovered on scene? Was Patrick armed?
The only weapons that I know were on scene were the officer's firearm and taser. However, I do not have all the information on the investigation.
Chief Winstrom, what role in a situation like this does that language barrier play? The officer maybe should have stopped to think at some point that Patrick maybe didn't understand it.
That's a great question, something that we're definitely going to look into.
Chief, you said you don't want to make legal conclusions or policy conclusions, but you were a veteran cop. You have seen lots of use of force incidents. Was this good policing?
So I appreciate the question, but I'm also the chief of the Grand Rapids Police Department, and I have certain rules to follow as far as disciplinary proceedings, and the police officers need to know that I'm going to follow them, and they're going to be held to high standards, which I've already let them know. I'm going to hold them to high standards, but I'm going to do it the right way.
Chief, are you able to say if this officer had any previous complaints against
I can't say at that time. Yeah.
What police agency showed up first on scene after the shooting? What police agency was that, Grand Rapids?
East Grand Rapids, I believe, was the first officers on scene.
What can you tell me about the response time for his call for backup then? That Grand Rapids police, when did they get there and what do you think about that?
I believe the first officers on scene came about 3 minutes after the initial call for backup, and it's something to look for, but there's a lot of factors there. There's the weather, there's the icy conditions, so that will all be part of the investigation as well.
Chief Winstrom, the city of Grand Rapids and the police department specifically have been called out several times over the last few years for lack of transparency. Can you discuss the decision that went into releasing the video now instead of earlier?
Well, funny you should say that, because I had the body-worn camera video on the first day. I had the in-car camera video on the first day. And because of a connection with one of my officers and a resident there, we had the surveillance camera on the first day. But as you can see from watching the videos, that didn't tell the whole story. However, I also knew that there was another video out there, the cell phone camera video. So I talked to the state police and I said I wanted to release the videos as soon as possible. However, being appraised that there was a fourth video out there, which, as you can see, told a much clearer story of what it was, I wanted to release all 4 videos at the same time, because there was the potential if I released those 3 videos and then the 4th one was released in a month, that I'd be accused of being less transparent, even though I did not have that video. So I worked with the Michigan State Police to get that video as quickly as I could a few days later, and then I worked with the prosecutor to make sure that we could reach a point where my release of all of these videos wouldn't interfere negatively on the criminal investigation that he's undertaking.
Chief, I just want to say this, okay? I represented the family of Isaiah Shows, the only black student killed at Columbine. I worked with that case from the time Isaiah's body lay in the Columbine Library. I also represent and serve as family spokesman for the 6-year-old that killed a 6-year-old over in Flint. And I just want to say that I interviewed Keith Ellison and told him when I interviewed him before Derek Chauvin had been charged that they were full of it. I use more direct language on the air, in a radio interview. I do at the station I'm here representing. I'm there in 2 capacities, 910 AM Superstation, and also as the political director for the Michigan National Action Network, founded by the Reverend Al Sharpton, who will be coming to town shortly. The point I'm making is I want to commend you guys for the openness and the transparency and just what you've shown us here today. My experience, real life, working with Worldwide Press, working with legal authorities, I know how often legal authorities stonewall it. I don't see the type of stonewalling that could have gone down here, and I just want to commend you and stay tuned.
I appreciate you being here, sir.
Is an improper place a civil infraction or a criminal infraction?
I know it's a ticketable offense, and, you know, I'm brand new here. I haven't even taken my licensing test yet. So I don't know. I'll tell you in the...
Could the city manager maybe speak to that then, or oversight?
That's information we can provide to you afterwards. If you have technical details like that we don't have right now, let me know and we'll follow up with you.
Is the officer still on the force?
Can you confirm where Lyoya was shot on his person, the distance of the gun to his person, and lastly, I think I saw that the taser was deployed twice. Did that taser actually make contact?
From my view of the video, the taser was deployed twice. The taser did not make contact, and Mr. Lyoya was shot in the head. However, that's the only information that I have. I don't have any of the autopsy, the ME's report, or anything else.
You don't know where on the back?
Correct. No. Yeah, the taser deployed twice, both times into the ground. You would hear 2 shots in 2 different points in the presentation, yes, sir.
Chief, the city manager videos, are there 9 videos out there? We had heard that there were...
So the 9 videos, to make sense of that, there's an additional body-worn camera video because the officer's video, which was found in the mud, actually triggered back on. So how the body-worn cameras work is certain triggering events automatically turn them on, including activation or deactivation of a taser, the turning on of a squad car lights nearby. So at some point in time after the fact, that body-worn camera video was turned back on. So you'll be able to access that video. It doesn't show the shooting incident. The reason it sounds like there's so many is because the home surveillance video was cut up into 4 separate videos. And so that leaves the other videos, which you can see the source video, which we provided the information to receive that. Yes.
Chief, the city manager said that the city's preparing for several days of protests. What is the message to demonstrators who will most likely be marching right after this press conference?
I support free speech 100%. Let your voice be heard. We love peaceful protests.
Is the officer still on the force? Are they on paid or unpaid leave?
The officer is on paid leave, stripped of his police powers, pending the outcome of this investigation.
Was the officer supposed to be end of his shift beginning?
I believe the officer was a daytime officer, so a couple hours into his shift.
Chief, in preparation to release this video, did you or anybody that you worked with here consult with any other cities or departments that may have gone through similar issues like this?
Me being from Chicago for the last 20 years, I've handled many police shootings myself, so I do have a lot of experience in this. I was hoping to never have to utilize that experience here. I did not reach out to any other departments as far as the presentation goes. I did talk to the chief of Ann Arbor. I talked to the chief of Battle Creek. Just they wanted to express, their thoughts with me in just for discussions. But unfortunately, this is something that we had quite a bit of in Chicago, and I hope this is the last one I ever have to deal with.
How do you think people here in Grand Rapids will react to this video over the next few days?
I don't know. I'm sure, like me, they'll be very sad. It's a tragic event. Yeah, and I hope that they show love to the Lyoya family.
We heard the officer say, let go of the taser. How long did Patrick have the taser? I mean, can you talk about?
From my view of the video, it looks like they each had a hand on the taser for about 90 seconds.
Each had a hand, like, same time?
So they were struggling over the taser. From my view of the video, so this is not a conclusion because I don't know what other information is out there, but it looks like that they were struggling over the taser for about 90 seconds.
How long did the entire interaction? Do you guys have like a specific?
You know what? I don't have that. I haven't timed it out like that. I'm sorry.
Chief, you were introduced to us as the chief, but also an attorney with a law degree. Is that correct?
That's true.
What do you see happening in the weeks and months ahead with potential litigation?
Well, I know Ben Crump is in town. He's a sort of well-known civil litigation attorney, and I'm sure that he was anxious to see the video, and he'll make his decision accordingly.
Would you be surprised? Would you be surprised if this ends up in a civil suit?
No, I wouldn't be surprised. No.
The officer looked at him by himself. Is that normal practice when they're out patrolling? And if so, like, is there any discussion being prompted by that?
Well, keep in mind that Grand Rapids Police Department is the second largest municipal police department in the state of Michigan. We have a lot of officers, so a lot of times we do ride two-man. Following this incident, we implemented at least a temporary policy where all of our cars are two-man while we reevaluate what our internal policies. However, there's many police departments in the country who only have one car on the road with one individual in it. So it's very common to have a single-person car, and it just depends on what works best for the municipality.
So, like at the time, the officer being by himself, is normal practice?
Not necessarily unusual at all, right?
Was that impacted by the fact that it was Monday morning at 8 o'clock? I mean, him riding by himself and.
That's a good question. I don't know as far as the schedule goes whether that made an impact or not.
You said that the department is reevaluating some of the practices and policies. Will that be made public? Even if the temporary policy changes are?
Sure. I think there's already been talk about having a lot of public discussions about this, about what the Grand Rapids Police Department can do better.
So Chief, my name is journalist Bankole Thompson. What happened here is obviously putting the national lens on Grand Rapids, and we've seen in the past where police chiefs, have had to resign, whether they were complicit or not in the actions. I mean, regardless of how this incident turned out, this unfortunate incident, it is under your watch. At some point, if there's a demand for your resignation from this community, I checked the numbers in terms of, the African American population in this town is very significant, almost 20% or 25%. If there's a demand for you to resign, is that something that you will accept?
Well, Mr. Thompson, thank you for being here and asking that question. And I'm an at-will employee, so I'll work here until they tell me to leave.
Can you talk about how the rest of the department is reacting to this? How is morale right now?
Well, morale's probably what you think it would be. It's everybody knows it's going to be a tough time. We're trying to rally together because I'm going to need the police officers over the coming days, over the coming weeks. I mean, through the summer. We need the Grand Rapids Police Department here. We need it because they're a vital portion of providing public safety. So I do my best to keep morale up, and but we know it's going to be tough times ahead. We'll get through it.
Let's go with 3 more questions, please.
Not as far as I know.
Chief, this has been extending now a week and a half or so, with all the discussion building out in the community and on the streets. What have the last 10 days or so been like for you with the pressure to come out with this and with all the discussion that is going on out in the streets about what may have occurred, cover up, all of that?
Well, I'll tell you, the bad is that it's an absolute tragedy. It's heartbreaking. It's been a difficult time internally for the police department, but the good is it's prompted a lot of discussions and a lot of connections, which I plan to make down the road as I stayed here longer, but it's forced the issue even early. So I like to think that there is some positive.
Chief, have you spoken to the officer either on the scene or since, I guess Brandon, since you were on the scene, did you speak to the officer or hear any statement from the officer?
I can answer that. I did speak to the officer on scene, and I also called him that night to talk to him, yes.
Can you characterize the conversation at all? How did that go?
I don't know how to characterize other than, when you're in a traumatic event like that, you would respond how you would think you would respond, somebody pretty much in shock.
Chief, there have been calls across the nation for overhauling and policing, and even in your swearing-in ceremony, you spoke about need for change. Do you think that this is an example of why there's change needed?
That would kind of cause me to draw a conclusion as to the incident, which I'm not willing to do until the investigation is over, but I'm very reform-minded, and I'm sure that I'm going to find ways that the Grand Rapids Police Department can do things better, and I'm interested in getting us there.
Can you confirm if Lyoya's car was broken down?
It was not, no. Well, I can't confirm whether it was in the process of breaking down or what the status was, but I know that it was a traffic stop.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, everybody. Oh.
Chief, from your viewing of the film, you mentioned that you believe he held the taser 90 seconds. In the 2-minute struggle, do you really believe that more than half of that he had the taser in his hand?
Commissioner, it could be 60 seconds, could be 90 seconds, so I didn't exactly time it, but that's my instinct from looking at it, but I'm sure when you get all the evidence together and slow it down, you'll be able to give a more scientific answer.
Okay, thank you for being here today.